Do you remember the old days of gaming? You know, you'd get a new game and you'd stick it out no matter what. It was your only choice, so what else were you gonna do? And no matter how difficult or how obtuse that game was, you just kept playing. And it didn't matter whether you were dying for the millionth time on 6-2 with Ninja Gaiden, or you're aimlessly exploring the deadly towers with no idea what to do. Back in those days, you just kept going, and you developed a sense of grit that gamers today know nothing about. And if you want any chance of getting through this game, John W. Beans, you're going to need to tap into that grit that you didn't think you had anymore, because this is one of the most obscenely difficult games I have ever played in my life. Everything in this game is difficult. Moving is difficult. Shooting is difficult. Healing is difficult. Platforming is beyond difficult. I'll get into all this as the review goes on. But when I say that literally everything is difficult, I mean that. There is a tutorial. It walks you through the basics of the game, but I found myself going back to it as I ran into new challenges because I really don't understand how any of it worked, so you definitely need to make sure you play this thing before you start the game. Now let's just start with the movement. Despite the fact that this is a top-down game, you do not control like Link and Zelda like you might expect. Instead, you kind of have this odd tank control. You get used to it pretty quickly, but it's just not what you expect when you first turn on the game. 2 hits and you die. The thing is, after you get hit the first time, your hat falls over your face and the control completely shifts. I can't describe it, but it's like you're controlling a drunk character who's just wobbling along. So you gotta get to cover so you can heal yourself. But in order to heal yourself, you have to put your hat back on. That doesn't seem too hard, right? I have a 5-year-old. She could put on a hat just fine. But here, you have to press a button to trigger a hand. The hand appears and you have to use the analog stick, draw a line from your hand to the hat, simulating a motion to put the hat back on your head. I can't describe how difficult this is. Sometimes you just sit there for what feels like minutes on end trying to get your godforsaken hat back on your head, and you have no choice. If you don't do it, you'll just wobble straight to your death, and checkpoints are so sparse, you're going to want to do it every time you get hit. You kind of get used to it eventually, but even when I felt like I was getting good at it, there were still times where I just couldn't get the angle right to get the hat back on my head. The shooting is tough too. There's an aim. When you hold the button though, you just lock in place and you can't steer your shooting once you press the button. So you better already have the enemy locked in your sights or you're gonna miss. And we'll save the dodging and jumping for later. But all that just gives you a small idea how difficult even the most basic of movement is in this game. So let me lead you through a little bit of a mini walkthrough. The story has you playing as farmer John W. Beans, who created this new breed of corn that will end world hunger. However, the lizard people land on his farm and start destroying things, which takes John on a quest to stop the lizard people and fulfill his goal to end world hunger. It may be a corny story, but I have to say, I did kind of enjoy it. It's kind of what you might expect to see from some cheesy 80s movie, but it fits the vibe nicely, and I really enjoyed the cutscenes and watching it unfold. So you start in your house. Your first mission is to head west, because that's why you left your gun, which shoots beans that are poisonous to the lizard people. The opening section is not too difficult. You have a few precise moves you have to make, so you have to get acclimated to the controls. You can move with the D-pad or the stick, and switching back and forth is useful for different parts of the level. You also run into these snakes before you find your gun. Luckily, by mashing the attack button when unarmed, your character unleashes a powerful series of left hands to take down these snakes, which is a common strategy I'm sure many of us have used to take down a snake, so props for realism. You eventually find your gun. Here's where it all went south for me. The lizard people shoot at you fast. You have to hit them 3 times, and they have large invincibility frames after each time you hit them. They also fire an extra shot at you that you better be ready to dodge. The first 2 lizards, there was cover nearby, so I'd pop out, shoot them, and then run back behind the box. If I got hit, I could hide behind cover to heal because the lizard people kinda are relatively stationary, so it's not too bad. But then you fight a lizard man with no cover, and I just could not beat him. As embarrassing as it was, I actually rage quit on this, the 3rd enemy of the game. Uninstalled my game and just said F it, it's just not worth it. But my gamer pride would not let me be defeated this early on, so I felt the need to reinstall it and give it another shot. You eventually get a rhythm. As long as you're walking, the first shot will usually miss you. At that point, you shoot the lizard people back. They now fire 3 times in rapid succession, which you could dodge pretty easily if you're ready for it. You repeat it 3 times and you're good to go. This is a strategy you're going to need to get used to, as is basically how you're going to take down almost every enemy in the game, so get good at it now. So you get past the lizard man and you get some explosives to continue on your quest. What follows is rough, as you learn to acclimate to your bizarre movement patterns, and there are these annoying bushes which make you move really slow and disable your dodge when you're in them. Here I died a ton. The general theme of this review is going to be me dying tons in each section, but just check out this lizard man. How the heck are you supposed to beat him? You're completely locked down from dodging or moving quick enough to dodge his attacks. I eventually figured out the solution, was that a grenade instant killed him, so I was able to use that. Okay, just keep on going. You see, you start to learn really quick. This is a game that demands that you learn to play on its own terms. There is no leniency in anything. You either figure it out or you tap out. I was making progress slow and steady until I eventually ran into my first platforming segments. So a couple of things you need to know. First, you dodge in the direction you flick the right stick in. If you're facing that direction, you dodge further. So for example, if you're facing up and you dodge up, you'll do a long jump. But if you're facing up and dodge down, that will give you a short jump. This will become really important for navigating these platforms, as you don't want to under or overshoot your jumps. Of course, there are also some really bizarre angles you have to jump, and the precision here just seemed totally impossible. It was all too much. I died on this part for about an hour straight, and then just decided once again to rage quit. I was just done with this game. Nonetheless, even though I was frustrated having to rage quit early on again, I still felt compelled to give it one more try. I eventually discovered that by gently tapping the right stick, an arrow appears that shows where you're going to leap. This made this part much more tenable, and once I discovered this, I actually beat this otherwise impossible part on my first try. Wonderful, I finally get to proceed and blame it on myself, not the game. I eventually found my way to a river and was totally stuck on what to do. I meandered around aimlessly, frustratingly dying over and over again for about an hour before I finally figured out that I have to bomb this wagon to create a wheel to go down the river. Not quite kneeling by the wall in Simon's Quest level obtuse, but I probably wouldn't have figured it out if there wasn't a segment in the trailer showing John riding down a river on a wagon wheel. This might be a good time to talk about the frustration of exploring. There are secrets sprinkled throughout this world, but moving around is so frustrating you're always scared to explore, and many dead ends just lead to useless items like an ammo pickup, which you don't really need. There's also an annoying mechanic where it just auto-saves at certain points, which is not bad when you're kind of going forward, but when you're exploring, you could auto-save yourself back to a point that's way back from where you're supposed to be, and then you're stuck and have to manually redo all the hard stuff you did all over again. It makes you just not want to explore. The problem is that there are weapons hidden around that I never found, so I was stuck with just a default arsenal for the entire game because exploring was just so hellish. Anyway, so you push the wagon wheel in and you start a river sequence. Of course, like everything else, it's obscenely difficult to control. You see, John moves around on the wheel, so if you want to move the wheel left, you have to move to the left side of the wheel and vice versa for the right. But since he has to walk to each end of the wheel, there's always an annoying lag before you can move in the direction you want to go. So this part was tough, but honestly, even though I died a ton, I'm going to say this is probably the easiest part of the game, as I felt like I could do it and I eventually did it. One thing that may help you to know is if you're back on the wheel, you're moving slower, and if you're moving slow and bump into the rocks, you don't take damage. That's going to be crucial, as it'll give you time to heal during some of the harder chase segments in the lever. Anyway, so you get to the end and you finally beat the first level, which I think took me over 3 hours. So you finish the wagon wheel and you're into the corn maze. The music goes away, replaced by the silent chirping of crickets, as you navigate this cornfield with a very limited range of vision. The absence of music on this part did two things. First, it did exasperate the sense of tension as you navigated your way through this dark corn maze, knowing that enemies can and will pop out any second. It also made me recognize just how fantastic the music in this game is. I usually don't notice music in games, but I really enjoy this epic soundtrack. And as one persistent thing throughout this entire game, as I was stuck on these levels for hours on end, I was really enjoying the tunes. In the corn maze, everything is dark. You know, you can tell where the passages are when you look, but when you look down them, you'll expose what's there. Enemies will pop out and laugh at you. If you touch an enemy, it's instant death, but they usually don't spawn right on top of you as long as you're moving slowly. And once you know where they are, you'll be ready for them. There are traps everywhere and instant death around every corner. There'll be an item or an ammo pickup up at the end of a corridor. You pick it up and a lizard douche pops out to kill you. I eventually got to the point where I just refused to pick up any items. The first section's pretty straightforward. You have a few enemies you have to kill, and you get to the end where someone is throwing corn on the cobs at you. You dodge in and out of them, which is much easier said than done thanks to the awkward controls. But you eventually get a rhythm that has you very slowly inching along. The next part of the corn maze, though, is much harder. The maze itself is much more elaborate, and the enemies are more frequent. I died for what seemed like forever on this part. I eventually got to a second part where people are throwing corn in the cobs. You learn the pattern, you can dodge around, and you think, gee, that's gotta be it. But nope, there's a third section, and there are no checkpoints. So you wander around aimlessly dying constantly. You're always thrust right back to the beginning of the level. It was around after I beat the second corn throwing and realized there was no checkpoints that I once again just rage quit and said, once more, I am done with this game. But here's the thing that I found. As I played this game, I've never rage quit a game so much in my life, but then just kept going back to it. There was just something compelling about the challenge, and I really wanted to see what happened next. So I just kept uninstalling the game, raging for a while, then reinstalling to try again. The third section of the corn maze is super cheap. There's a part where enemies on both sides ambush you, and you're guaranteed to die, and then you get all the way back to the beginning to try again. When you're ready for it, you learn you can grenade one enemy, and then jump to cover to take out the other. It's not that difficult, but the fact is it's super annoying because you're guaranteed to die when you're not ready for it, and you have to backtrack a long way to get back there. But you beat the ambush. There's one more crazy corn throwing section that requires you to really memorize the pattern and be precise. Dodging should be easy in theory, but you can only dodge twice before it cools down, so you must carefully time your dodges in all parts of this game. But once you beat this, you're finally out of the corn maze and into the mines. Thank God, I thought. So you get to the mines and you start feeling pretty good about yourself. At this point, you're pretty well acclimated to the controls and the combat. The mine throws a few new enemies at you. There are these annoying flying bugs, but they're really easy to dodge. There's eyeballs that you need to grenade to kill, and landmines that are totally invisible. When you step on one, a circle appears around you, and you have to dodge in the green direction to not die. These were surprisingly forgiving, actually. There were definitely a few times where I felt like my aim was off, but the game registered a success, so that was good. I felt like I made pretty good progress through most of the mines. There's some cool minecart segments that have you jumping between them, navigating falling bridges, some really difficult platforming, but I definitely felt like I was up to the task. I think this was probably the level I had the least difficulty on. It was tough, and it really did exasperate how annoying exploration is in this game though. There was some extremely difficult parts I had to navigate just to get to nothing. Like why? Why put such an unbelievably challenging part in front of a room with a single can of ammunition? Or there were these hidden bunkers that did absolutely nothing. Like there was this one part here that was ridiculously impossible. I feel like I must have died a million times. I made it to the end and there was a bunker with a memo about Obi-Wan Kenobi and Han Solo. Okay, it was mildly amusing, but I didn't need to go through that level of hell just to read your stupid Star Wars joke. Despite that, I did enjoy the challenge on the stage. And one thing about this game is that you do get better at it. Like, I feel like I could replay most of this game without too much difficulty because I've endured such hell to get to this point. I've had to get substantially better. So I give the game a lot of props for that. It is a game that you will never luck sack your way through anything. When you beat a section, it's because you beat that section, not because you got lucky, as the game never offers you any quarter. It was also in the mines I learned I should have had a weapon that I missed. The manual talks about a shotgun, and I found new types of ammo that I could not pick up in the mines. There were parts that were made much more difficult because I did not have this weapon, but I was able to persevere and make it through. The last section is just ridiculous. There's some really tough platforming, and then a tree that you have to grenade from across the chasm. You only have so many grenades, so you better hit it on your first try, because you have to use another grenade to make it back to the starting point to ride the minecart back to this tree. I almost rage quit here again, but I persevered. I made it through down to the alien fortress, which is the final level of the game. I really feel like being so close to the end, I just have to finish it. And my skills have got to be up to the task. I mean, I made it this far, right? Like everything else, the last level is really difficult, but I was making progress up until I got to this part here. Getting through these spikes required such a level of precision, it basically just seems impossible. But like everything else, I just kept going. I started off the review talking about the grit that you needed to beat old games, and while that's been on display, I think for the entire review of this game, it really comes into play here. You see, these spikes are just impossible, as I just said. It took me well over an hour of dying over and over again to beat this part, and then you exit the screen and no save icon appears. Can it be? Can there really not be a save point after this impossible part? I press on and find myself in an incredibly difficult room. You have to move this box around with a buzzsaw. The buzzsaw spins as you push the box. One touch and it's instant death, and you have to navigate this thing through tight labyrinths of spikes and enemies. Needless to say, I died when I got here. I was then transported back to the spike room. There really was no save point, and that was that for me. The game completely beat me. I emailed the developer and I said, listen man, I'll still review your game, but I'm not going to finish it. I can't believe you didn't put a save point at this spot, and even sent them a video of it. I then took a break to play this. This is a game called Ghost Vandal. Here it is. I'm making a video of Mega Man clones, and I gotta tell you, this one is fantastic, but I'll wait for that video to talk more about it. Still, I calmed down after a bit, and I just felt like I couldn't give up, and so I went back at it with the knowledge of the labyrinth that awaited me. We have a big winter storm here, and I work in a school, so I'm playing this on a Sunday, knowing there's a snow day Monday, and I just want to buckle down and give it one more chance. The spikes kicked my butt over and over again. I started to develop some strategies to make it more bearable, and eventually got to the point where I could beat them with relatively decent consistency, but the buzzsaw level was just insane. You can't make a single mistake. You have to be really careful as you navigate this maze, and it is really long to get to the end. I died and retried for over 2 hours before I finally made it. Thank God there was a save point after. Now before I finish, I want to just talk about my thoughts on the game, whether or not I could recommend it. It's a hard game to tell you if you're gonna like. Objectively speaking, it is one of the most difficult games I have ever played. It is punishing, it is hard to control, it's relatively obtuse. Every single second is difficult. You just die and die and die, and you make very little slow progress. I had many instances where I was stonewalled for over an hour trying to beat one screen. At the same time, the game is really unique. It does not control or play like anything I've ever played. And as oddball as the controls are, that is by design. The developer is trying to make a game that tested your precision with the analog sticks. And I could say that he succeeded, because the precision you need to do anything in this game virtually defies human ability. And here's the thing. Half my time spent playing, I was totally miserable, cursing at life. At the same time, I just could not stop. And I wanted to. I wanted to rage quit this game and play something else, but I just kept coming back to it, and I can't even tell you why. I have no problem walking away from difficult games, but this one just kept drawing me back. It's so weird and quirky, and the design is so unique, I just wanted to see what else it offered. Your enjoyment of this game will hinge largely on your patience. You have to play the game by its rules. There's no shortcuts, no cheating, and lots of punishment. If that sounds fun to you, then you may enjoy it as much as I did. Just know it is not for the faint of heart. So anyway, I finally make it past the nightmare buzzsaw room. Could it really get any harder than this? Thankfully, the answer is no. What follows next was difficult. There was a super long, narrow pathway of spikes that come to life as you walk around, but it wasn't so bad. Some platforming, which at this point I'm pretty good at, so I was able to beat those parts pretty easily. And finally, the nightmare that is the Ascent Chariot. This thing is just ludicrous. You have to walk with it. It's actually not as hard as it seems until you throw in the fact there are all these bones on the ground that completely hinder your movement, and fog so you can't see where the bones are. There are spikes all over the chariot, so if you touch one of the edges, you take damage. I genuinely feel that I would have never beaten this part, except for the fact that if you do a little exploring beforehand, you find a tin hat. This hat gives you 3 extra hits, meaning you can take 5 before you die. Even with all that extra armor, this part was still brutal, and I died for a solid 45 minutes before I finally passed it. But I did pass it. There was some tricky platforming with really difficultly placed enemies, a really easy boss battle where you fight your clone and you just have to lure him to a grenade. He grenades a tree stump and it falls on him. There was an arena battle that was a total nightmare, but probably wouldn't have been so bad if I found the other guns throughout the game. Stuck with this pistol, it was tough, but I managed to spam grenades to win. All of that was tough because I said earlier, every second of this game was tough. It just wasn't as tough as the nightmare preceded it. However, I would still rather play the Turtle Tunnel, 6-2 in Ninja Gaiden, and Ghosts and Goblins twice than do any of those things that I just did. Still, you make it through and you are finally staring down the final boss. And you probably won't be surprised to find out that the final boss is difficult. The first step is figuring out his pattern. If you want any chance of beating him, you gotta know exactly how he works, because like I said earlier, you never get lucky in this game. I'll explain the pattern to you. You start in this little square. He sprays slime randomly around the room, but as long as you are in this square, there will not be slime there. There will also be a clearing, either at the top or the bottom. It is random, but you'll have some time to react as long as you're on the center square. You then have to jump onto the clearings. If you land on the slime, he will come lunging at you with an attack that would be difficult to dodge since your movement is slowed and your dodge is disabled. Sometimes though, you will be close enough to the clearing to walk on it and then dodge away before he can get you. While you're standing on the clearing, some drones come. You gotta kill them, the slime goes away, he lunges at you, and you have to punch him because he's immune to all of your weapons. You have to repeat this 10 times and then he goes down. There is very little margin of error here, but I have to say, as difficult as he was, once I figured out his pattern, it actually didn't take me that long to beat him. Maybe around 30 minutes or so of dying, which in this game is really not that much. You beat him, and there it is, the credits roll after the ending's cutscene. I have to say, despite all the rage quits, despite the massive amounts of death and frustrations that I faced, I really did enjoy this game. I think the reason why is because it harkened me back to a time where games were just so unforgiving, and the only way to beat them was just to hunker down and die a million times. This game captured that nostalgia perfectly, and the feeling I got after completing each part really was fantastic. I don't think I can remember a time where I would get this excited over beating a level in a video game. My heart was racing and I was tense almost through my entire 13 or so hour playthrough, but it always felt so good to clear a really difficult part. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this game. It may not be for everyone. As I said earlier, it's tough and there's no easy mode, but if you like a really difficult game that's also pretty unique, then I think this one is well worth your time.